Good day to our viewers here on EBnet stream. This is Greyling bringing you the second episode in the series Power Plays and Paydays, where we analyze the political environment, both here in South Africa as well as globally, and the impact thereof on our economics and how that ultimately feeds through to investment markets and returns for our members. I must say that when I first started this series, I was a little bit concerned that there wouldn't be enough to talk about on a month-by-month basis. But I must say that our government is the gift that keeps on giving. And I remember when I was growing up, my mother used to watch a soap opera on TV at 5:30 in the evenings called Loving. And there would be brothers stabbing brothers and backstabbing and people dying and then coming back to life and a whole lot of shenanigans that I thought was not real. But I started thinking that the script writers from that series are actually working in our political circles. So I'm looking forward to unpacking some of this again today with my partner in crime. And there is a pun in that, which I think is worthwhile unpacking. But Bheki and Mahlobo from Frans, Cronje Private Clients. Bheki, welcome again. Thank you for joining us.
Leon, thank you for having me again. It's great to be on your show.
So today is the start of tariffs with the US. It's been confirmed that we will be facing 30% tariffs from today. Ultimately, our relationship with the US is questionable. I'm not going to draw a conclusion on that because I would like to hear your opinion on that. And where we left off in our discussion last episode was that we've been struggling economically. There's no growth coming through. The policies aren't supporting growth. And now we're at a bit of an impasse with our second largest trading partner. Bheki, where are we? Why have we been slapped with these tariffs? Are we just one with everyone else in the world, or are we standing out in some way in that regard? And what will the impact be on our economy?
Yeah, Leon, the first show that we did, one of the points that we also discussed there is that our government, the ANC government, allows things to wash over them. And another point that we also within that theme is that we said that it's likely that you're going to see these tariffs being implemented, and that's exactly where we are, is that from that time that we spoke, which was about a month ago, 4 weeks, in that 4 weeks, no deal was tabled because of the seriousness from the South African side to meet the Americans was not there. And the consequence of that is that last night, the White House released a list of countries, about 71 countries, with various levels of tariffs. And those countries are countries that don't feature in that 10% baseline of tariffs that the Americans have implemented on imports coming into their borders. And what that means is that one way or another, those countries have a problem with the United States in terms of negotiations or other relations regarding the United States. Within those countries, South Africa features within the top 10 of countries that are in the higher band that are faced with high tariffs. And if you can recall as well, Mr. Trump sent letters to other countries regarding the BRICS nations as well as other countries as well. And South Africa's tariff level of 30% is the same in that letter. And that says something. It says that the South Africans haven't been serious enough to table the vast quantum of deals that the American looks to actually achieve. However, even though we have this, the door is not completely closed for the country to actually meet the agreements and concessions that the Americans want South Africa to be made. And our view is that within a week we can actually solve this.
You say that, so that's interesting, and I'd like to hear your views on how we go about doing that. But if I listen to the commentators, or if I listen to our president and I listen to our Minister of Finance, we've been um, involved in serious negotiation with the US. Yet, if you listen to any US commentators, it's almost as though we haven't picked up the phone. There's all the
Mm.
speculation about Mcebisi Jonas and the role that he was meant to be playing, yet they know he's
Yes.
not getting an audience, yet they're saying that that's rubbish, that he is involved. I mean, who do we believe right now? Has the government been negotiating, yes or no?
Short answer, no. The government is very successful in portraying that they're actually doing something while actually not doing anything. The deals that they've been tabling for the Americans have been a piecemeal deal, whereas the Americans want a vast quantum of deals to be struck. And the Americans are quite eager. That's a very important point that needs to be made here, is that the Americans actually do want to trade. Is that if you can look at Africa as sort of as a market share of some kind, within that market share, China has a significant chunk of it. And over the past decade, the Americans have been falling behind. And they look at that market share and they look at China and they want to start eating away at that market share that China has, and also for them to be a significant partner. Within that, South Africa is a very important country, given its geostrategic alignment, given the ports that are passing the Cape of Good Hope, as well as that of the quantums of deals that the Americans want to strike. Now, coming back to your questions, no, we haven't been serious in tabling those deals. We've been talking of these small scale deals, but we haven't been thinking at the scales that the Americans want us to actually meet them at.
When you say the Americans, I think I reflect back on that White House meeting where I mean I still cringe when I think about it, where we had Johan Rupert saying he sleeps with his doors unlocked. I mean, I've never heard anything more out of touch with reality in South Africa, but we had our golfers there for whatever reason. Um, there it was portrayed that the problem that the Americans had with us were all around farm murders and so on. That seemed to be the focus. But it goes a lot deeper than that. If you have a look at what's been happening at within the House of Representatives or the senators, how they're viewing
Mhm.
the country, this has been going back prior to the Trump sort of era. So can you unpack that a little bit about what are the real issues that they had? And I also read this morning, I think it was on News 24, that part of the negotiations, if there were negotiations, was also around disbanding the BEE legislation.
Yeah, I mean, the American issues, they've been quite clear on what has been the issues that they've been facing with South Africa. The first one is how we choose to align ourselves at the geostrategic level, at the foreign level. And that's us aligning ourselves close with Russia, which the Americans perceive as a national security threat towards themselves and their allies. So that's the first important thing, is that we've chosen from a foreign policy perspective, at the disadvantage of our strategic alignment with Western allies, to align ourselves with the country that we don't benefit all too much of. The second point, which is what you touched on, is that on our empowerment policies. South Africa's empowerment policies, as they currently stand, act as if you get empowerment after you get investment and job creation, whereas you actually get empowerment by having investment and job creation. And what empowerment policies are in the country right now is actually that of tax and tariffs. We do tariff the Americans, and we also tariff other multi corporations that want to set up shop here in the country. And that when they want to set up shop here, we say, give us a certain percentage of your board. And to that, these companies go elsewhere, making South Africa ininvestable. The Americans, the issue with them is that they see that as a tariff in actual fact. When you read, for example, some of the things that you've also listed there, that it's being perceived that the Americans have been unfair towards South Africa. However, South Africa has been the one that has actually also been tariff other companies that want to operate and invest here in the country. And in order to address that, there's few things that we need to do in order to reduce our tariff level, which I think we could do, and within the firm, me and France believe this, within a matter of roughly a week, down towards the 10% baseline. The first step, which is what you touched on, is our empowerment policies. Instead of having companies giving a certain percentage of their board, what could happen is that we can actually encourage businesses that incentivize job creation. And if we want those businesses to spend on social programs, let them do so. And there are BEE equivalents that other companies in the country have actually been doing. So that's the first step. The second step that the Americans have been quite clear on is South Africa's Expropriation Act. In it, within that act, it allows the expropriation for fixed and immovable assets below market value. The issue with the Americans is not that on land. It's the fact that it allows the government at some point to expropriate property below that of market value. And in any democratic society, to have a successful democratic society, you need strong property rights, which encourage investment, and out of that investment, you have job creation. What then would need to happen in order for us to be taken seriously by Washington, D.C., in order for us to actually have a deal, is that you send that Expropriation Act back to Parliament and reinstate. If the issue is not that, if the government is saying we don't have an issue in paying market value, then reinstate it and make it explicitly clear within that policy that we're willing to give a market value for any property that we choose to expropriate. The third point, which is already what we've touched on, is that we do not need to take extremely harsh lines with the countries that we choose to line with at a geostrategic level. It doesn't make any strategic sense for South Africa to do so. In fact, we're missing out quite quantums of investments that the Americans are thinking of. And what are they thinking of? The first one, being the biggest one of that, is that on energy. The point that I've also made to you, Leon, is that we have enough defunct coal stations to be refitted in a short space of time, within 2 to 3 years. And the Americans want to back South Africa compared to that of the Europeans. And if you actually look at the national grid practically, and the most cheap and cost effective to do that is to actually generate electricity through coal. The Americans want to back us on that trip, and they want to do it at the scale that was needed for the country to see high levels of economic performance. And should we do that, it should we table that deal, roughly, I think within a week, we can definitely have a tariff level sitting at about baseline of about 10%.
So I hear you. Makes sense. But when Cyril Ramaphosa came back from the States, he was asked the question about BEE in Parliament. And I think his response was that the black voter feels, his words were, feel warm in their hearts when they see a black person owning a company. And I felt that was, first of all, I feel like it's out of touch at the end of the day, because surely all people want is jobs, the ability to put, look after their families, send their kids to school, put food on the table. Yet that was the response to something like that, without any consideration of what perhaps the implications are of that policy. So that was the way that he expressed it. As far as the stance and alignment with international other international countries that are opposed to the US is concerned, we've had now Brazil come in terms of the case against Israel and so on. So it seems to be going in the other direction, not in the direction that you are talking about, which just to me sounds sensible. So am I missing something?
Yeah. Well, the sensible is what you stated there, when what Mr. Ramaphosa perceives, which is the wrong interpretation of what South Africans do view. South Africans want to own businesses. South Africans want to have jobs. They don't want the government to tell them who to hire or what portion of their board they should circumvent or give towards to that of the state. That's not what they want. You can see this in the polling that we've done. We can see this as well with the practical ways of South Africans choose to live their lives. In that, particularly on the BEE question, about 70% of registered voters view that BEE does not benefit themselves, but the ones that are politically connected and the ones that are elite. And a large proportion of South Africans actually want to operate their own businesses. So it's a complete misinterpretation of what actually this country wants. And you can also see this domestic policy, that the policies that have been implemented here in the country are at odds with what South Africans want. And you can also see that from foreign policy. And unfortunately, that's where we currently are. It doesn't make sense. It's not normal. It's not where we should be, because other countries are trading in good faith as well. Go ahead. Sorry.
What I want to challenge is that sometimes people say to me, it's based on the ideology of the ANC,
Yes.
where the ANC comes from as a struggle movement. They still speak about the movement, the struggle, and so on, which I understand. It's difficult to almost shed that when you so that's been the reason for getting to where you are. But I don't think it's that. I don't think Cyril Ramaphosa is naive to the implications of what's going on. I think there's a system that's been going on behind the scenes that has been lasting for years and years and years prior to Cyril Ramaphosa coming into power, which doesn't allow him to actually move away from those policies. And it's starting to come to the fore now in terms of some of the scandals that we're seeing. We had Zuma 1.0 and the state capture. Now we have Ramaphosa, we had Pala, now we've got the Senzo and Kunu allegations from General Nkwazi. Now if you start drawing the lines between some of the underworld figures and their associations all the way into the police and back to the president and his family, you start thinking, well, hang on a second. Is this just part of the program that they are running and absolutely nothing to do with the struggle or anything to do with the man in the street?
Yeah, definitely. What you're touching on there is front and center within the ANC policy, in that you have a party that has an executive of about 80 members. And those 80 members have vast amounts of interest, and also some of them, about half of them, have serious allegation of corruption that could see them facing prison time of about 10 to 15 years. And case and example is what we've been seeing over the past 3 weeks. What has happened, which has been to the detriment of the ANC as well as towards its failure, is that of Cronje deployment, in which you're hiring key individuals within state-owned enterprises, not because they are able to do the job or not because they want to service the nation, but they want to service that of the party. And you cover that up as that of Black economic empowerment, that's not what it is. You're not empowering Black people by doing that. Instead, you're empowering that of the ANC. And the ANC has drawn a murky line between the party and that of the state, in which it's synonymous right now. If you're saying the ANC, you're saying that of the government. And that's the issue now when it needs to do with these harsh decisions. 10 years ago, we told them that if you don't fix the electricity situation, you'll be faced with intense load shedding. That happened. In 2012, we as a firm told them that if you do not improve the material circumstances of South Africans, you will lose an election. That happened last year. Last year, we told them as well, if you do not continue to improve what we told in 2012, should you not heed our advice and arrest the decline in basic service delivery, you will see a 40% number come the May elections of last year. And that is what happened. Is that once you have that policy directive where you're actually not hiring people that are critical, but hiring people that have firm decisions, it's a different type of administration that we have here compared to the one that we had earlier on in South Africa's first decade as a democracy, in that its policy actually is a barrier towards taking those firm decisions that needs to be done. And that's where we currently are, where the ANC allows things to wash over them. This weekend, as we saw last night, the ANC is having a meeting over the weekend. They'll discuss these things, and they're not willing to take those harsh decisions in order for us to actually see a normal trajectory of the country.
But I think it's so important that in these conversations we can get a bit emotive. I mean, we all ultimately want to see South Africa succeed. We're all South Africans, yes. And that's people keep on talking about how we unite as South Africans, because there is something that we have this common goal, if I could put it that way, amongst all of us. And I don't have any issue with the policies of the ANC. I support BE, I support transformation, but it's been the implementation thereof. And I had a debate with a colleague of mine the other day who vehemently supported the ANC and the actions they were taking because he felt that it's incorrect for the US to bully us, and that we were bullied in the past, and therefore we shouldn't allow that to happen. But again, it's not considering the implication of these things. It's no one's saying BE is wrong. What we're saying is the way BEE is being implemented and the purpose ultimately behind BEE is not what it's stated to actually be. And that's where things are not working out.
Yeah, I agree. It is important that we do have empowerment of people that don't face high levels of material circumstance in the country. That's not the disagreement here. The disagreement here is that it's covered under the umbrella of in Black economic empowerment, which is not what is happening. And by the way, it's not the opinion of the Americans solely of what's currently happening in South Africa. It's the opinion of every other sovereign nation. The difference between them and the Americans is that the Americans are fully prepared to say it. From the Americans as well as other nations, they look at this country and they see a sub 1% economy and they see unemployment rate above 30%. Extrapolate that over the next 10 to 20 years, and you have a country that may capitulate to high levels of crime and violence, as well as a collapse in democratic institutions. That's what makes South Africa uninvestable. Look at South Africa's investment levels, which sit at below than that of emerging markets. It's what is currently happening. It's the observation. It's a clear observation. But it's only the Americans that are willing to say that. And they're saying it as well because they're saying it, of course, because they want to do trade here in Africa, but they also, in regards to South African politicians, this is actually an opportunity to actually meet the table.
Hi, pals. Greetings from Sammy. EBnet is proud to bring you top quality content from experts across the financial services industry in South Africa and internationally for free. Your support helps us in doing this. All we ask is that you subscribe to our channel by clicking the subscribe button below. Share this video with others you think will benefit from it. And give us a thumbs up if you are enjoying the content. That way you help us help you. Thank you from the team at EBnet. For more great content, please visit www.ebnet.co.za. Ciao, ciao, and bye-bye.
So I think also what's interesting about it, and whether it's coincidental or because of what has gone on, that we're starting to find our voices as South Africans. I think the average white South African was a little bit scared to express any contrary view or to even discuss some of these policies and so on, regardless of how they felt, because they were concerned that they might be deemed as racist within that process. Now, all of a sudden, people are starting to talk and everyone's starting to hear each other. I see it with the podcasts and so on that are ever growing across the country, and more people actually starting to say, hang on a second, this isn't right. And I think that's so healthy because now we have a conversation going. And if we have that conversation going, we can all accept that we might be wrong or we might have bias and that we have to overcome that. But that's how we overcome it, is through those conversations and challenging ultimately each other through that process. But I want to come to then there's a bill that's going through the legal system ultimately in the US. Can you explain what that's all about and where that might end up and the implications on South Africa, but then for these politicians?
Yes, so that is a separate issue compared to the high tariffs that we're currently facing. The US-South Africa Bilateral Relations Act, which has passed the Foreign Committee as of last week, allows eventually, there's a whole process that it needs to occur for it to become implemented, and it's quite a long way for it to be there. What it needs to happen now is that it needs to pass Congress, and within Congress you have the House, and then you also have the Senate. So it first needs to pass within the House then passes it towards the Senate, and if those two boards within the Congress agree on that same bill, then it gets signed by the president. And what it essentially allows is that as soon as it has the signature of Mr. Trump, within 30 days, he's supposed to table a list of officials, particularly that of ANC leaders, that are sanctionable. But it's not only that of ANC leaders, it also includes South African institutions. In that, there's two things that South Africa is currently facing. One is what we started this conversation on, and that is that of tariffs. The second, which is a separate issue, is that of sanctionable events that could occur, particularly on South African institutions as well as that of ANC leaders. These two forces are moving ahead largely due to the doubling down of foreign policy relations that the current government is taking right now. An example of this is the downgrading of Taiwan's office in Pretoria as of last week, and us continuing to host Iran here in the country and growing further relations with them. So as that continues to occur, and as we do not talk to Americans and we still don't have anyone in Washington currently, those two forces come into the front door of South Africa. And what that essentially would mean, should that eventually come down the line, which at the moment we do not say it's a likely prospect, but it's still within the works, is what you say, and it still has a very long way for it to come along. But should it eventually get towards that point, should relations between South Africa and the Americans decline to such an extent that we see that bill being signed by Mr. Trump, what essentially means for the ordinary person on the street is that it will trigger a massive repricing of the currency and that of bonds. In that now, from the current situation of the tariffs, although we view tariffs as not to trigger a different category of South Africa, we've been a sub 1% economy over the past decade. It's just that it means that it remains so much so the case now, given these high tariffs. But should that sanctionable act or bill at the moment, but should it become an eventual act, it will significantly weaken the currency, which means that we see high levels of inflation affecting the pockets of millions of South Africans. That is a serious thing that should be taken with a high degree of seriousness. And it may continue, should we continue to double down in the positions that we currently have.
And the reality is it's a bipartisan issue. So, I mean, provided we just don't become overshadowed by other issues, it's likely to be passed because there is general support from it. In fact, I believe that this is one of 3 bills that have been put forward. This is just the furthest in the process, going back even to the Biden days where the Democrats were acting similarly.
The way it was put to us as the firm when we were in Washington, by officials in America, is that they've never seen in a way in which a country has united Democrats and Republicans, and that was South Africa. That says something as well, and it says something with the points that we've said along with our discussion.
So it sounds gloomy, and I don't want to be too negative around things. I think what I find interesting, and I had another discussion earlier today with regards to how our investment markets have actually almost decoupled from the economic situation. I mean, we've had real returns in excess of 10% from equities over the last 5 years per annum. So it's almost strange how the two haven't impacted or been associated in that sense. You set out a plan of how quick and easy it can be to turn things around, essentially. The issue is not the policies of the ANC, it's the execution and the reasons behind that execution ultimately. And in the next episode, I'd like to unpack a little bit about what's been going on in our crime intelligence and police services and so on, because I think there's a lot to be said or to learn ultimately from that. But in order to change that, we've either got to vote to get new people in that will execute with the right heart behind it all, or alternatively, our government of national unity needs to start challenging and changing. But that doesn't seem likely. It does not seem to be working. In fact, where the DA, I always think of the DA as the barking dog, always making noise. They've now gone a bit quiet. Every now and then there's a bit of huff and puff, but I'm not seeing anything that really makes me feel that they're going to manage to make that change while we're in the current state of affairs, with the exception of they're planning for the longer term and Helen Zille perhaps running for mayor of Johannesburg.
Yeah.
So can you just touch on that?
Yeah. Firstly, the point on the GNU, the current formation of the GNU, our view is that it is not a coalition of government that would see the reforms necessary for South Africa to grow at about 4%, which is what other countries are growing at. It is just a piecemeal deal, holding back the holding of that of the government. But at the moment, we're not seeing a seriousness from a trade perspective as well as from a domestic perspective that this country needs. But the important thing that needs to be emphasized within the GNU, if you look at the demographics of the 2 biggest parties within that coalition, being that of the ANC, made up of the aspirant middle income class, and this DA, which is made up of the established middle income class, those are the 2 voting blocks in the country, biggest voting blocks that we're seeing from our polling data, as well as if you were to follow election cycles coming to that of 2024. These people want the same things, regardless of the circumstances that they face on a day-to-day basis. Bring that to Johannesburg and some of the urban fringes in the country where you are faced with declining service delivery. And these individuals are looking at alternatives. And should that alternative be that of Miss Zille, or when she actually campaigns to be mayor of Johannesburg, she would need to actually close a gap of 10 percentage points and above between her party and other parties. Now, that may seem like a huge gap to close, a huge road down the line, and it's indeed a one. She would need to also be approved by her own party, as well as that to have a successful campaign. But if you saw last year's election, as well as the polling of this year in February, where the ANC declined from 40% last year to 30% come February when they were pursuing the VAT hike issue, they returned back to 40% now. You can see these 10 percentage movements within the ANC party. So 10 percentage gain is very possible, and it's also possible at a city level. Should Miss Zille rather, narrow that gap and for her to be successful and arrest the declining basic service delivery in Johannesburg, it would open the door for the DA come the national elections come 2029. What that means, though, is that for the people that are looking for those opportunities in that of Gauteng, the highways suddenly have lights. It's not dark, not Gauteng. That of Johannesburg, the highways have lights instead of it being dark. The potholes are fixed. Electricity is done at regular intervals, allowing people to bath the like thereof. That support goes towards that of the DA, and some of that support gets drained from that of the ANC, opening the door for a successful campaign by the DA come the 2029 elections. It's a very long way to do that. It involves a capable team of that alternative, be that of the DA that is. But should she be successful, which is a big if, it essentially would mean a reverse of what you saw in last year's election, where the ANC was polling at 40%, may actually come down towards 20%, and the DA that was polling at 20% come closer to that of 35%, up to that of 40%. So that is essentially what it means. Should the basic service delivery, the decay of basic service delivery be arrested and reversed, be that of the alternative of Helen Zille?
It sounds to me like we need a new political party that just focuses on delivery. You just coined the word there, the basics. So are you keen?
Yeah.
Should we do it? Should we form that party?
I'm in favor of any party that front and center. I mean,
Yeah.
you could say this, but what I'm also noticing with South African politics is that you actually also have to do it. You have to be very smart in how you do it. You do the work, but you're also very smart in how you do it. There's a reason that I've spent my time in the United States, and what I try to do is understand people, is that when they support Trump, they're not particularly looking into the exact policies that he's implementing. They see the headlines, they see all the headlines, what he's doing. They're looking at his wins, strategically, his wins. He wins the election. He wins his 12-day war with Iran. He wins as well with some of the deals that he's managing with countries around the world. And they see that and they support that. He wins with what he's doing with the Department of Education, given the perspective of Americans, what they're feeling with what's happening with the education there. He wins with what's happening in the southern border. And it's continue a buttressing of his support, bigger and bigger and bigger. You collect these wins. Compare that to here in South Africa, where the ANC chooses losing positions. They lose with the tariff level. They lose with day after day after day, seeing these officials within police and getting arrested. They lose with the trade agreements that could have been happening, and support for the ANC goes down and down. And even they lose on the material circumstances that people in this country definitely need to be reversed. So for a party to become successful, it needs all those wins, and it needs them all in combination. The only way you do that is to have capable people. You need that political momentum. You need that political capital, but at the same time, you need the high level of skills, ruthlessness for that party to succeed. And at the moment, I don't currently see that. And it could also happen that you see that within the ANC, hopefully at some point down the line. But at the present, I don't see that at all. There's no one within the ANC that's capable to actually hold that seat and to be in the driving seat of that political party and campaign.
Bheki, I agree with you. I don't naturally see it, but I also don't naturally see how this is going to ultimately change. It's a long road for us to travel, but I've no doubt we will get there. I do think that's the outcome will ultimately be positive. But exactly what that plan is right now, I'm not seeing the obvious solution. And I'm quite interested in, and as a set up for our next discussion. Well, I say that, but between now and our next discussion, so much could happen. Who knows what we'll be talking about? But there've been the scandal now around our police services and involvement with organized crime and so on. Minister Mkhunu has been put on leave at our expense, and a new commission has been formed.
Mm-hmm.
Typical, it run for ages, everyone forgets, move on. Have you done any polling now since all of this has come to the fore, and how's that impacting the ANC? Because I can't see these solutions as being particularly popular.
We haven't done polling as of recently. Our last polling was in April. However, we do plan on polling in the coming months. So at the moment, I can't tell you exactly where the ANC polls, as we don't have the numbers currently. But what I can say, though, is that what we've seen within the ANC voter base is that 10% chunk that is willing to move in and out of the party depending on the issue. And for South Africans, particularly on policing, this has been happening over the past, since 1997, if you look at policing in the country, in that the policing has been outsourced towards that of the private sector. For every one South African SAPS police officer, there's about 450 South Africans. For every one private police officer, there's about 100 South Africans. The definition of a state is one that has control and the monopoly over the use of force. And that's what you don't see that here in South Africa. It's a testament to the receding government, but it's also a testament, if I were to end the very positive note here, to the private sector. We see this in policing, but we can also see this in diplomatic relations with that of the United States, is that they look at American firms. That's why they're attracting a lot of people, particularly from Stellenbosch. If you're looking at accounting, was that of science, robotics, and other universities, is that we actually do have good universities here, and we have a huge pool of skills. And those people want to stay here in the country because they see what this country offers. And they hedge themselves in their little enclaves, that of being of policing or that of community watches and cameras coming towards their neighborhoods and solar panels and the like. But those people are here. And that's the opportunity that lays here, is that what defines the success of this country are those particular individuals and countries. In that while you see a very unsensible policy position being taken up by the government, is that we shouldn't outsource responsibility and trust towards that of the state. I mean, it's very important that we maintain law and order and respect law and order. But if you can find gaps in between where the state has receded, and we can plug in those gaps which the state allows us to do so, be it that of policing, electricity, and the like, point which we can't do in any other country, that is what defines the success of South Africa.
So I hear you, and that's again comes to the nature of us as South Africans and how we pull together and find solutions. What's the saying? A boer maak 'n plan is
Yeah.
a good way of putting it. But I'm a director of an initiative that seeks to combat or change the discussion or debate around gender-based violence, to try to create an
Yes.
awareness so that people can act early or I suppose manage themselves. The stats are staggering in terms of in rural and in townships and so on, the number of rapes and so on that take
Yes.
place of young girls. So private sector, fine, but who can afford
Yeah.
that? In
Of
those
course.
areas, they can't afford it. So these are the guys that are
course.
ultimately suffering, and that's just not good enough.
Yes. I agree with you. It needs to happen at the scale that those people also benefit from the private sector entry. And that's the point, is that we need to also be looking at those individuals because they're literally in a rut at the moment, given the high crime levels that they currently face. I also come from those areas in the Eastern Cape, and I also do spend my time in the East Rand here in the city of Greyling. So I do see the receding basic service delivery. And for those individuals that can't opt out, they are the ones that need to be front and center for any policy objective that's been done. And given what's being tabled, that's not being done at the moment.
So look, I'd like to wrap it up there on that sobering note. I think what I'd like to just end off today by saying is that these discussions need to happen. We need to have our eyes open in terms of
Yes.
what's going on so that we can all play an important role going forward. So we can actually fix it, because I do think the only solution is us sticking together, keep on having the discussions, know
Yes.
what's going on, and make good decisions, whatever that might be, and respect those decisions. So that's the whole purpose of power plays and paydays. So Bheki, thank you again today for your input. Look forward to unpacking some more of the soap opera, but also to hopefully getting to talk about some of the wins going forward. But I suspect that we might have to bring the Springboks into our conversation in order to do that in the short term.
I think they are definitely our national treasure. And another one is also bringing back what I see coming on the 17th of August, Dricus du Plessis, the middleweight champion within the UFC. South Africa, that's the thing, is that we actually do have success in this country. We just need to look. We have success.
100%. I agree. And I interact with so many people like yourself on a daily basis, and always starting to see what talent we have within this country. And therefore, I remain optimistic, and that's why I stay here ultimately. So, Bheki, thank you very much. I wish you all the best. We will see you again in a month's time.
Thank you so much for having me. See you again in a month.
Cheers, Ed.
Cheers.